All right, everybody, good evening. It is Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Central, and y'all know what time it is. It is time for Conversations with Commodores, and I've got JD, John DeWitt, with us this evening. JD, how are you doing, buddy?
I am doing all right. It's nice and sunny still here in Southern California, so that's not too bad.
Well, I sure appreciate you making some time, and I predict we're going to have a whole bunch of Commodores wanting to say hello and share some love for you tonight. So I appreciate you making some time.
Absolutely.
JD is originally out of Arkansas, but now calls the West Coast Huntington Beach home. And if you guys were not a teammate of his, which I was for one season, you missed out. This was the hardest working dude. He really, and I'm gonna give a little praise to him now. You know, Walk-On. Not only did he earn a scholarship, he earned some awards during spring training, or excuse me, during spring practices. In addition to the scholarship, ended up going to medical school. Now he is I don't even know how many books you've written. I couldn't get through the whole Amazon authors page. But in addition to being an author and a chiropractor, JD is just doing so many good things. So John, I can't say enough good things in addition to having you on the show tonight.
I really, really do appreciate it. Those are some of my best memories growing up. Was the whole experience with Watson Brown and the guys there at Vanderbilt, and then Coach DiNardo, of course. And it just met a lot of really, really nice guys. And I already remember feeling old when I was a senior, so I can't. I don't know what's going on now.
Well, you know, just in that time period. When you're leaving home and you're on your own for the first time, and you have a heap of responsibilities thrown onto you, you're outside your family bubble from childhood, but it really is still a pretty innocent time. And particularly given how old we are, when you look back, it really is a unique time in a person's life. But we're going to get to your story in a minute. Share with folks about the 2022 version of John DeWitt and his family and your practice and all that good stuff.
All right. 2022. Well, 2021 was interesting. I had some interesting health things happen in 2021, but 2022, I have an amazing fiance, and she's got two 9-year-old twin girls that are just amazing. We have 9 pets, a puffer fish, 3 guinea pigs, 3 dogs, and 2 pigs. The pigs weigh about 130 pounds each, which is fun.
Oh my!
We like to call it the farm. I take care of them a lot. But I work at a clinic in Riverside, which is about an hour inland from where I am. And then I also work at a clinic down the street that focuses more on sports injuries. I some of the NFL guys come in there, which is kind of neat. Work a lot with the beach volleyball people, but have written a whole bunch of different books, from natural vision correction to my latest one. I'm working on a concussion book, which is kind of funny because as a player, we all used to hear the phrase "rub some dirt on it" if you got hurt or something. Well, that's been taken for a lot of stuff. So one similar to that is tape an aspirin to it. So that's what I titled the book. And it actually is pretty neat because it works with a company out in Canada that analyzes cognitive function and can help you track your progress as you're going through. I mean, I took the test because I know I probably had multiple concussions. I know of a couple for sure, but I mean, if you play ball, it's kind of, you get a concussion pretty much every other play, if you're a lineman especially. So that's fun, but that's pretty much, we have a camper. We just went to 6 different states in 12 days recently. And that's fun to do in a 19-foot little Sprinter van camper thing with 3 ladies with me. That was fun. But yeah, it's just been great, and hearing all the great stories in the group of the guys that we used to play with. Actually, I have my high school team. There's someone that wants to try to turn the high school senior year, because we ended up winning the state championship. He's wanting to turn that into a movie right now, which is kind of interesting. But
Wow.
yeah, we'll see. That's going to be years from now, I'm sure. But that's pretty much what's going on with me.
Oh my gosh, so many questions right there to where do I start? Well, I got to ask, when you go on the 12-day, 6 state tour, one, did the pufferfish come with you?
No, no,
And two, did the pigs come with you?
no. Only one we took with us was a little Pomeranian,
Gotcha.
which is fun to see when you're walking through a casino in Vegas. A little Pomeranian in a bag. People thought it was a stuffed animal.
That's very funny, and I'm sure that they see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Dogs in being carried in bags, maybe even small pigs as well.
Yeah.
Well, well, JD, I do remember you coming out of Arkansas. I think you were a freshman when I was a senior. I do happen to remember that you were a state champion because I was a state champion my senior year, and those things that it just kind of clicks with you because we had a lot of guys who were state champions during high school. But how did you escape out of Fort Smith, Arkansas? Why did you not end up in the Southwest Conference? Well, I guess Arkansas was coming into the conference about the same time you were a senior.
Well, it was Southwest.
How did you get out of Missouri or that part of the country and make your way?
Well, it was kind of funny because where I grew up, if you went to the University of Arkansas, that was just kind of a continuation of high school. And
13th grade, yep.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'd like to go somewhat further. And I mean, Vanderbilt's only 6 or 7 hours away, but I mean, at least it was Tennessee, and I wasn't like totally out of my comfort zone living out in LA or something. But it was my parents had always kind of pushed me to kind of do bigger things like away from where they were. And it's like when I played in Scotland, we played in the championship game, and that was the first time either one of them had ever gotten a passport. And I mean, and they were probably in their 50s, 60s. It was like, oh, but anyway, I just wanted to see what was possible, as well as the whole getting a scholarship thing. It was just so many great memories, especially from that first semester, because that's all I was focused on.
Who recruited you when you were in high school? Which what
Washita Baptist wanted me to play there. I went to Northwestern Louisiana State for a visit, and the Demon Deacons, I remember, was their mascot. I don't even remember what division they were, but I remember sitting down with the head coach, and he said, I watched that state championship game, and I was actually looking for somebody else and was watching them, but then I kept seeing your number coming in the picture, and I'm like, who's that guy? It was kind of funny.
Yeah. John, it's interesting that you say that. I bet we've had a dozen or more guys on this show, and that's been their recruiting story as well. One of their teammates is a big high profile player, and that the recruiting coaches also see someone having an excellent game, and it turns out to be them, and they just find their way.
Yeah.
Well, did you know of I assume you knew of the SEC. I assume you had heard of Vanderbilt, but had you ever seen them play or visited the Nashville before you came on your recruiting visit?
I actually had, because my best friend's sister was Wendy Schultens, that played on the women's basketball team.
Oh, she was a fantastic basketball player.
Oh yeah, I mean, she was the tallest girl I ever knew up until Heidi Gillingham, I think, the girl that was like 6'9". Yeah. But she was Wendy was about 6'4", and that was, I think it was either 1 or 2 years ahead of me that she was at Vanderbilt. So I went to visit, and that's back when Will Perdue was on the basketball team and all the big guys. And I went to see her and her brother, and I kind of went to visit, and I thought it was nice. And I really honestly thought there was no way I would get accepted to the school. So I just kind of applied, and it was going to be there. I believe SMU might have offered me a partial scholarship or something. So it was between Dallas and Nashville. And
SMU was still coming out of they were trying to shake all the cobwebs off of the recent death penalty that they had just undergone. And the rebuilding of that program took a decade or more.
Yeah.
But, and later on, Vanderbilt ended up playing them a couple of years later on down the line. But that's interesting. So you may have come in the spring of '90. I'm just guessing, because that's when Wendy would have been on campus by then. And that's the year that the basketball team won the NIT. I don't know if you remember this, but it had Will Perdue and had Goheen and Booker and Stroud.
Yeah, I think I do remember that, but I actually think, I think that is right. Yeah, that's when I was there.
Well, that was a good time to be there. We had a good baseball team as well. But that's so interesting to learn how guys make their way or find out about campus. Now, do you remember your recruiting visit? And as I say every week, the statute of limitations, because of our age, is long gone. Just know that the Keystone Cops may still be watching this. So,
Oh no, it's
proceed with
fine.
caution.
I do. I remember my trip was my dad and I went out there. I cannot remember who the head of recruiting was when Watson Brown was there, but I already, as soon as I got accepted, I was like, all right, this is my mission. My parents said I couldn't go to Vanderbilt if I didn't get a scholarship because they wouldn't be able to pay for it. And so I was totally dedicated, focused on getting a scholarship. And the movie Vision Quest had come out fairly around that time, and that just got me super fired up. And so anyway, my dad and I showed up. They gave us kind of a quick tour of the facility, which was about half as big as it is now. And they took us in, and I sent him my VHS tape back in the day, and he watched the state, I think it was the state championship game. And we sat down with him, and he just looked me dead in the face, and he's like, you know what, you're just too small, and you're too slow to play in the SEC. And I just kind of looked at him, and I said, okay, all right. And then I got up to walk out, and my dad said, don't let that discourage you. And I was like, oh no, he doesn't know what he just did. I'm definitely going to get a scholarship now. It was kind of fun.
That was your Loudon Swain from Vision Quest moment. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you decided to come to school, but at what point between the recruiting visit and your decision to come to school did you start getting to know or to meet some of the guys who'd be in your class? Or had you met any of them maybe on your visit?
No, I hadn't met anybody that I recall. And because I was treated like a regular student because I was a walk-on. So, I mean, all I had to do was extra practice and stuff. But yeah, I don't really remember anybody in particular. And since all the walk-ons were there were like half a dozen of us, and we were kind of in our own little group. And then, I don't know, it was a very interesting time. It was funny because I would bug after every practice. I'd go out early, and then I'd come out late, and I'd be sitting there waiting for the coaches to walk down the ramp to get back into the facility. And I would ask Coach Brown every day if I got a scholarship yet. I'd be like, "Have a scholarship yet?" And he's like, "Not yet." And I'd keep asking him every day.
Oh, that's so awesome. Awesome. Speaking of awesome, we got some of our former teammates in the house, including Lewis Woolridge, who says to tell you hello.
What's up, Louie? I know you're up in LA. We're going to get together.
Another SoCal. And I just spent some great time with Lewis in Hawaii a few weeks back, catching up. We got Ed Parrish in the house. Hey, Ed. And we got Tom Fitz, number 7, one of my teammates. He was a little before you, JD. Guys, I've got John DeWitt with us out of well, not out of Arkansas anymore, but he's out of Huntington Beach, California. And John, when you first were as a walk-on, if you remember, we had Luke and Bill and Dwayne and Tyler and all those guys in the equipment. How were walk-ons treated differently than the scholarship guys? Meaning,
as far as the staff,
where was did you have a different locker room? Did you have different?
No, we were just kind of all put like in the back of the locker room where there weren't, it was like with the mops and stuff. They're supposed to put them back there. And I mean, it was just kind of a given. In any drill during practice, it was the walk-ons that would hold the dummies. And I remember once I was holding the dummy for Derek Sarter, and he just blew it up. And I don't know if I fell down or not. And he was a very aggressive individual. And so he was like talking trash or something. And I jumped up and I patted him on the helmet and told him it was a good hit. And he didn't know what to think. He was
it's funny that you say that. His former roommate, Kerry Clem, was just on the show. And Kerry talks about having to go to the other side of the practice fields to break up fights or to calm Big Derek down. But you're right, Derek, he brought such intensity to practices. And he's been on the show and tells a wonderful story. His journey's been phenomenal.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I even remember his theme song at the senior end of the year thing when he was leaving. Everybody they'd show highlights and have a theme song. His was Cool Mo D, I Go to Work. It was awesome.
Oh, and the fact that you remember that is so memorable. But I don't know if you got a chance to see Derek when he was on the show a while back, but he is, he's cooking up barbecue in the Dominican Republic and has been a chef for years.
That's not too bad.
Not too bad. Guys, I've got John DeWitt out of California with me tonight. He's class of graduated in 93 from Vanderbilt. So he played for Watson Brown for the first few years, or first year or two, and then finished up with DiNardo. Who was the recruiting coach, if you remember, who recruited you out of high school? Was there a particular coach who was kind of over your territory?
Not that I'm aware of. I kind of just was doing it all on my own because I just found out I got accepted, and yeah, there was no recruitment.
and I thought, so well, JD, take us to the day that you learned that you had earned that scholarship, because that has to be one of the more memorable days of your not only college career, but maybe of your life. I don't know.
Right. It's really interesting because, I mean, I don't know if you've seen The Secret and all that kind of stuff, but, and this was way before then anyway, but I was so convinced, and it sounds kind of cocky now or whatever, I was so convinced and so focused every single minute of every day that first semester that I just knew I was going to get a scholarship. And people would, I mean, it was so nice. At one point, Chris Coron, who's an attorney now in Kentucky, I think, he said he would give me his scholarship, because he was like, you need, if they don't give it to you, you can have mine. And I was like, no, I'm good. And it was so funny because Coach Brown asked me to come up to his office. I was like, okay. It was like November, it's the end of the season.
What year was this, John? What year?
90.
Was this the fall or of your sophomore year?
No, it's fall of my freshman year.
Okay, so the fall of '89.
Right. And so he had me come in, and he said, well, just want you to know that yes, you're doing great, and we're gonna put you on full scholarship. And I was like, okay, awesome, thanks. I didn't like jump up and down or anything, but I went and told my friends, and I remember Tom Vincent had the best idea. He said, why don't you have Coach Brown write you a letter to your parents saying that you got a scholarship, and you can give it to them for Christmas. And I mean, it'll be like the best Christmas ever. And I was like, that's a good idea. And I actually have it framed at the house still. It was in the pictures that you posted.
Yeah, I didn't know that that's what that letter was. Guys,
Yeah.
You need to go in the promo that I created for JD's talk, our conversation. Go to on Sunday. I put that letter in there. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it was so fun. It was the best Christmas. My sister didn't think it was a good Christmas, because as soon as my dad opened up that letter, Christmas was over. He started calling everybody. He's like, you're not going to believe it. It was pretty funny.
So the Christmas of '89, your sister says that's the one where JD stole Christmas from her.
Yeah. And then actually, sadly, after that, it was all, my dad had a thing for football. So he was definitely every game, he was following me around, and he didn't visit my sister nearly as much.
Where was she in school?
She was up in Minnesota.
Well,
yeah.
We were a little closer. Nashville's a little closer.
Yeah.
Man, that was an awesome day. You know, one of the things that is beautiful about social media, and there are many things that are and many that are not, is when you see those reveal videos where the coach brings up the hardworking walk-on and announces the scholarship, the team goes crazy. Or this week, if you saw the one with Eli Manning where he went undercover with Penn State.
Penn State, yeah.
That was an awesome video. But those kind of moments, I think, are team bonding moments that the player who is the recipient of the scholarship, those are just once in a lifetime moments. And I guess back then, maybe we didn't do those kind of things, or it wasn't as common, but still nonetheless, still as impactful as coach telling you one-on-one. That's a pretty special day.
Yeah, it was great. And there is something to be said for not having so much the phones that take pictures and all that stuff, because then you just you're not looking through a device, you're actually there in the moment. It really helps it really sink in.
It is, and now we're starting to sound like two old dudes, but but how did life change at school for you when you came back in January of your freshman year?
Well, as I said, I was so focused that first semester on getting the scholarship that my GPA was not good. And so I kind of had to make up for it in the off season. And I did a little bit better, and just I don't know. The thing that I love the most is because I always had so much trouble gaining weight that I was invited to go to the training table whenever I wanted to. And so I was there for lunch, I was there for dinner. And I mean, I was just eating constantly. I remember drinking a half gallon of whole milk, just trying to gain weight. It was, but as far as school goes, it was school, and then it was spring ball. And then it was just kind of, it was almost like school was like an afterthought. I was just there for the football stuff.
Well, clearly the academics you caught on and caught up, because you wouldn't have been there very long. But where did you live your freshman year? Did you have a roommate at that time? Do you remember?
My roommate, my freshman first semester was Dennis Zirkus, and I don't even know where he was from. I don't remember which.
Was he a regular student or also?
Yeah, he was a regular student. Yeah, and I can't remember exactly what the name of the dorm was, though. It's the freshman dorm. Did
you live in Branscombe Quadrangle?
Yeah.
Maybe you lived in Lupton. Back then, that's where we lived. I know, just being a couple years ahead of you, I lived on Lupton 3, but guys lived all 6 floors.
Yeah, and so I was just there, and then after that first semester, I moved in with Robert Butler, who his dad owned the sporting goods place. I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, he's a coach at Brentwood, I think, out there. But yeah, he was my second semester. That was
it wasn't Walter Nippers, was it?
That
was it.
Yeah,
that was probably the biggest well-known sporting goods store at the time.
Yeah,
that's interesting connections. Well, so we had a great increase in caloric intake on a daily basis. I assume you gained weight during that spring.
Barely.
Well, I was going to ask, with Coach Bates, you never know with the program that he was putting us through, but I think, didn't you come in as a defensive end and then shift into the interior line as you got older?
Well, it was kind of funny because, I mean, as a freshman, I only weighed 213 pounds. And so I'm like, and then they put me at offensive tackle at first or something. And I'm like, what? Are you blind? I'm like, I can't. But yeah, and it was defensive end. And, once I probably, actually, since I was 213 that first semester, I think I got up to 235. So I did gain about, 20, 25 pounds.
Well, going into the spring, where were they having you to try out or to test?
The first couple of years I was on the edges, and then I can't remember the defensive coordinator. There was a little guy that came in as a defensive coordinator, and I don't know if he was mad at me or what, but he put me in at nose guard, and I'm like, and I'm going against Tennessee, and I mean, I've got 800 pounds of guy laying on top of me. I'm like, well, this is not working. But I was blocking the hole. Nobody can get through.
Oh, that's hysterical. Well, it's I guess by then you had Watson for your first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And then DiNardo the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume you were redshirted your freshman year.
Well, yeah, definitely.
And as I don't know if it's a stigma or if I don't think it's this way as much as it was back in our day. But when you go from being a walk-on, they do treat you differently. They do. You don't get the reps. You're, as you said, you're holding the dummies, but you're on the field. You're part of the team. You got the equipment, and some guys get elevated to scholarship status. But how did you appreciate that even more once you were put on scholarship? You had to have been friends with the walk-ons, spending so much time. Talk about that dynamics, if you remember how that worked.
Oh, I totally do. It was interesting because the only time, other than holding dummies, the only time the walk-ons really got on the field and actually could try to play well instead of just imitating another team was during scrimmages. And then we'd be like the very last people to get out on the field to see how they're doing. And that was the only time I had to ever do anything. And so that's when I really focused on that to get the scholarship. And then afterwards, and when I got the scholarship, I remember, I think it was Pete Roselli was another walk-on the team. Will Pryor was a walk-on the team. Joe Peoples
Well,
was a walk-on as well.
yeah.
And
And my year was Mike Voigt.
okay.
Mhm.
And it was just interesting because we were like a bond, because we were going through kind of the not most popular group or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Will and Joe were so nice, because they were just congratulating me and were so excited. And I believe they both, I know Will did end up getting a scholarship. I don't know if it was for his last year or whatever it was. So that was nice. But Roselli, he was one of those really bad attitude guys, which is why he was a walk-on. I don't guess he just wanted to play. I don't know. It was very confusing for me, but everybody has their own stuff.
When you go to a private school as opposed to state school, the private school tuition and the whole experience is so much more costly to the family unless you have tons of academic money. It's
Right.
rare that I think that Vanderbilt gets tons of folks who walk on. And I think that makes that experience even more unique because you are part of the team, you're contributing. And you're so right about that, the friendships or the bonds with you guys, because you all came with the same experiences from high school. We're all big fish in small ponds, but then you're even a smaller fish when you get to the SEC level.
Oh yeah.
But
And
it's
that's one of the things that I love too, is you were just talking about Alabama earlier.
yeah,
There's just something about Alabama when you're at Alabama and you hear the music going, Sweet Home Alabama and all that. I was just in my head. I mean, it wasn't intimidating to me. I just thought it was exciting, because I'm like, this is college football, and it must have been awesome to be a student there.
well, it's just from my own experience. When I was deciding where I wanted to go to school, I had a full academic ride and was told that I could walk on to play quarterback. They already had 3 scholarships my year already signed. But in all candor, I looked at the defensive roster of Alabama at the time, knowing I'd be scout team. And there's Cornelius Bennett, there's Derek Thomas. And I'm like, that's not the experience I need.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, JD, talk about the academic side of things. Clearly, you found your way all the way to ultimately going through and completing medical school, and you've been a chiropractor for many years and a published author. But the transition coming out of high school to Vanderbilt is never, I shouldn't say never. For most of us, it's not the easiest transition, particularly when you're combining SEC football with the high academic standards of our schools. So talk about your
Right.
experience, because as you said, that first semester was not academics weren't necessarily your main focus.
Right. And interestingly, and I'm sure this might be pretty common, is during the season, those semesters were always a little less impressive than the off season, because you just are tired and you don't have time to do all
Yeah.
that stuff. But I remember when I was at Vanderbilt, I remember the scout for the 49ers came out and it was raining. And so Shelton Quarles and I and Gerald Collins and might have been a couple other guys went into the basketball gym to run our 40s in there, like diagonally across the court, which was funny. And that got me invited to San Francisco for a tryout, which was kind of fun. But after that, I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I ended up helping out the coaches at my old high school.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was hilarious. I would sit in there with the coaches and they would just tell me, they say, I don't believe it. In high school, I never would have thought you would be the one that's like talking about playing professionally and all this stuff. And then they start talking about some of my old teammates about how great they were. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
You
And
were a
then,
late bloomer. You were a
yeah,
late bloomer.
exactly. And
Yeah.
then that's when I really knew that I wasn't done with football, because I'd be out there before the games just getting so fired up hearing the band play and everybody. And I'd just be yelling at the guys saying, if you're not fired up, and I'd just be freaking out. And worked as a youth counselor at the church. And we went on a ski trip. And at the ski trip, it was just a super emotional time, because at the end, you kind of share what you felt at the trip and stuff. And I just told everybody how much I appreciated the support, because they knew I was going to go to a scout camp and run and see if any NFL guys wanted me to sign with them. And it was just really great to be able to, and that's what got me through the first semester. I was reading a chapter out of the Bible every night and really trying to stay focused. And that's kind of where I was through the youth counselor and things like that. And it just was very exciting. The biggest shock to the system is when you're done playing pro football, now what are you going to do? Put that on your resume, and people are like, okay, so you can lift heavy things. What does that mean?
No, it's so interesting. I always enjoy getting into that part of the journey. And just as a side note, in November, I'm going to invite you and a panel of 5 or 6 other former players to come back, and hopefully your schedule will permit. That's what we're going to talk about: life after college ball, entry back into civilian life. It's different for everybody. But before we get to that part of your journey, I want to talk about you playing in the SEC. And it's one thing to be admitted to Vanderbilt. It's another thing to be a walk-on. Then it's yet another thing to get a scholarship. But you weren't done. You were in playing time. So I want to talk about that, and not just some playing time. I mean, you had significant playing time. And some of these pictures you sent, those are just, every one of them has a story. And I don't expect you to remember how you made this play on 3rd down in the 4th quarter against MTSU, but I want to talk about those feelings and going through that, knowing that instead of playing in front of 2,000 people at home at Arkansas in high school, you're now playing in front of 92,000 people in Neyland Stadium. Did it matter to you? Did the crowd mean anything? Or is that, when you get between the white lines, that's where your focus was?
It's interesting because there was a very unique dynamic that happened, because I was so focused on, and I've read all kinds of self-help books about this too. I was so focused on getting the scholarship that I didn't have anything in my head after that. I didn't have any goals to be all SEC or anything like that. So after I got the scholarship, I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh crap, now what? It's like, what am I going to do? And that first season that I played, I remember starting at LSU, or not LSU, SMU.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so overwhelmed. I was still really thin. It was super humid, and I just had a horrible game. And Watson Brown.
Was this in Dallas or was this in Nashville?
It was in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a horrible game, and Watson Brown, Coach Brown, came up after the game in the locker room. It was just kind of like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. And I just, it took me that entire season to kind of get it worked out, because I believe it was Kenny Simons was starting for a while too, for the rest of that season. And I just had to kind of regroup. I had a really good friend of mine that was a superstar linebacker at Arkansas, and I used to always have chats with him right before the next season was going to start, because he'd be like, you know what to do, just do it, and stay focused and all that. And it wasn't until my junior year, I guess, that I really focused on gaining weight and got up to 251 pounds. Couldn't believe it. It was amazing. And then played LSU, had an awesome game, and Corey Harris fumbles it, the game-winning touchdown, fumbles it as he's crossing over the line. And that mentally, I was destroyed after that game. I was like, how I did everything we still lost. And I was just in tears in the locker room. And I remember Coach Oliver came up and, was trying to make me feel better, but that was rough. So there's definitely an emotional roller coaster.
Well, sure. And it's a team sport, and it's, you hope you can rely on your teammates. And Corey was a fabulous football player at Vanderbilt, but everybody has their moment.
Yeah.
And but JD, we got all kind of Commodores in the house for you tonight. Let me run through some names. Let's see: Flavius Smith, Hunter McCarty, Joe Peeble says Big DeWitt.
Big Joe.
We got Coach Gary Shepard. We got OJ Fleming and some others. Thank you, guys.
OJ, he's such a good guy.
He's all right, No, OJ and I have been trying for over a year to get together on my trips to Nashville, but Bud, sometime this fall we will connect. And He's always here, and I'm sure Dwayne Jones will be along pretty soon. John, you get through your Vanderbilt years, you've got graduation in sight. Clearly on your mind is wanting to play at the next level or see if you can play at the next level, but that's probably not the only thing on your mind, because ultimately you went to medical school, but that was kind of put on hold because you did have the opportunity to play for different pro leagues. But I want to talk about the tryouts, because that's the next step after you do. I don't know if they called it pro day back then, but you said as you guys ran for the scouts in the gym, now they have a dedicated pro day where I guess all of them come in one day, but back then it may not have been that organized.
Yeah.
But you're getting feedback. Hey, we want to see you again. So here's an invitation to come to our camp. So share a little bit about that experience, and then making some of those squads and playing overseas.
It was interesting because Alan Young was the other defensive end on my team, and great, brilliant guy. I think he graduated from undergrad and Owen Business School in like 5 years while he had it all paid for. It was nuts. But I totally forgot the question.
I want you to share a little bit of your experience about trying out and making and playing in the different pro leagues.
And Alan, he and another student had started a management company, and so I was their first client, and so they were like my agent.
Mm-hmm.
And and I said, well, what happens if we're on the same team? Who's gonna? And then they only want one end. How's that gonna work? And he's like, we're not gonna end up on the same team. Don't worry about it. Well, we ended up on the same team in San Francisco, and so he was already there, and I just flown in for a weekend tryout. And it's really interesting how it's very cut and dry. You get a round trip ticket, you get there, you have like 2 days, and then you fly back unless they tell you not to. So it just makes it nice and simple. And went out there. It was between me and a guy called the Dump Truck that weighed almost 500 pounds. He was huge. And I don't even know how much. I probably weighed 230 pounds maybe. And they brought me in there. They were awesome. It was great to be in the locker room. I sat there, and this was the scariest thing. And I don't know if it's just me, but mentally, I remember sitting down because I hadn't processed how far I'd come from high school and all this stuff. And I was sitting there looking at my 49ers helmet right there, and got my locker room. Yeah, it's got my name, but it's like in Scotch tape above the locker. Mm-hmm. And I consciously looked at it, and I said, I have two choices here. I can enjoy this whole experience, or I can focus on, I'm making the team, I'm going to make it happen. And I just chose to enjoy the experience for whatever reason. And so went there. They said the same thing. They said, you're not heavy enough. It's not going to work. And so I ended up going home. And it was just, it was so interesting because between then and when I graduated, my best friend at Arkansas, he killed himself. And so my person to kind of stay me focused on my football goals was gone. And I don't know if I use that as an excuse or not, but I just decided to have fun in San Francisco. I practiced hard. It was neat to meet all the guys, and then I left.
But your journey wasn't over from a football standpoint.
And so after that, I decided I was going to train really hard, really trying to gain weight, and pay to go to a thing called a scout camp. And it was in Texas, and it was kind of the same thing. You paid money, and the scouts would come look at you, but mostly it was scouts from the Arena League or the Canadian League. But because it was in Dallas, Rich Sneed for the Oilers just happened to be there. And he pulled me over and he said, did you really weigh 250? And I was kind of like, yeah. I was like, don't put me on a scale right now. But yeah, I'm 250. And it was really interesting because I don't know what it was that he saw, but within the next 3 days, they'd offer me the minimum contract, which is like $103,000. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, and signed with them, and it just kind of went crazy after that.
But at that time, weren't the NFL's teams, the franchises, paired with NFL Europe. Was that
Yeah.
going on at
And
that
then
time?
they would allocate players to go to Europe, and that's what happened to me. The Oilers ended up sending me to Scotland, and once again, ironically, Alan had played in Scotland the year before, Alan Young, and so I showed up in '96, and we ended up winning the entire championship. We played the Frankfurt Galaxy in in Scotland. We won the whole thing, and so that was my first championship ring, and that was exciting.
Well, you go from the journey just keeps getting, the story keeps getting even better. And the fact that it was your parents' first time getting passports and coming
Yeah.
over, how surreal. You're in the middle of Scotland. You're playing American football for a Scottish-based team that has connections with the NFL. That had to have been surreal. And what are you, 25 at this time?
Yeah. And it really was. I mean, just the flight over there, I mean, such as longest flight I ever been on. And the jet lag lasted for 3 or 4 days, and it was just like, woof. And they had the worst season, the worst record the season before, and then we ended up winning the whole championship. So they came out with a book called Worst to First or something like that. But it was really interesting because the Scottish people didn't really know what to think, because we had all these pads on and helmets, and they're like, isn't it just rugby? I don't understand why you wear all the pads. They don't wear all the pads. And in the back of the programs, the game programs, they had like an explanation of the rules for American football.
That's very funny.
But it was great, and I still was only about 250 pounds, but had a lot of fun. And then after that, I played in the Arena League in Nashville, ironically, so back in Nashville. So that was kind of neat.
I bet that was fun. But when you won the NFL Europe, was it called the Cup or the Championship? What do you remember?
Well, at the time, it was called the World League of American Football.
That's right.
And you get like a big crystal globe. That's the trophy.
And did you get any hardware yourself individually?
I did not. No, I don't know. I didn't get any hardware myself.
I didn't know if they gave out rings or.
Well, yeah, we got the championship ring. Yeah, I have that somewhere.
Oh, that's fantastic. But ultimately, as we all do, Father Time catches up athletically. Right. It's time to hang up the cleats and the helmet. And you knew that day could come at any point in time.
Yeah.
Do you remember when the reality, though, set in? Were you sitting, I don't know, in a hotel room in Amsterdam and your season had just ended? I'm making this up, but was there a moment where you just knew it was time to move on to the next phase of life?
So like I said, it was a very long, there were probably another 10 years after that playing in all different leagues. I got called a journeyman up in Montreal in the newspaper because I was all over the place. And of course, one of those years I played in the XFL, the CFL, and the Arena Football League. And I got audited because the IRS was like, you're making money all over the world. What's going on? But we were playing, it's ironically, I don't remember what game it was, but I was playing arena football in Las Vegas. And I was definitely older than a lot of the coaches on the field.
You know, John, this plays out. This is a hell of a story, a movie. It'd be, an incredible cover story if you were doing some nefarious things to keep the IRS from hearing and learning about it. So you play for a decade or so in these professional leagues. So you're in your early to mid 30s at this point.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's time.
Well, it was ironic because I had applied for chiropractic college before that season and had just told them I'm going to squeeze one more season in and then I'll start school. Well, not too far into that season, on one of the plays, this offensive lineman rolled up on my ankle and I felt it didn't hurt, but my foot was bending ways it wasn't supposed to bend. Oh. And later I found out I tore all the ligaments on the inside of my ankle. Ooh. And they said I should have had surgery that right away, but I never did because they didn't really diagnose it. And so that was it for me. This is a perfect example. I was so old that after the player rolled up on my ankle, he stood up and apologized. And he said, "Oh man, are you okay?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm pretty sure I'm not okay." It was pretty funny.
Did he call you sir?
It felt like it. It felt like it.
All right. By the time you're in your fifth, by the way, you probably hold the Vanderbilt program record for most number of professional leagues played by a former player.
That's something.
I don't even think it's close. You're in a class by yourself. But by the time you're on your fifth or sixth professional team or league, are they calling you grandpa at this point? What's the nickname you're getting?
No, they actually didn't. They just called me JD. Everybody
Just
always called me
JD?
JD, and they never really. I mean, it was great because that season in Vegas, there was a player that was really great, Steve Kanopka, and I mean, he saw me and was just like, he was just like, I'm so, I'm so glad you're on the team. This is awesome. I've heard all about you and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I still had it until I blew out my ankle.
All right. So we have a career-ending injury, significant injury, and that's well before the current modern day medicine, sports medicine of today. And by the way, Daryl Griffin says to tell you hello and says he says, good to see you looking healthy.
Hey, Daryl, I'm trying.
All right, so we get into chiropractic school and it's time to put up the cleats, or are you still having second thoughts about it?
Well, my first semester of chiropractic college, I had a walking boot on that ankle, so I was pretty sure I was done. And then once again, because I didn't really have, chiropractic college is like my big goal. I just kind of, because I went to pharmacy school for a couple semesters and then I just didn't really like that and was just trying to find some direction because, as you said, I knew eventually I was going to be able to play.
Yeah.
And went to chiropractic college. And I remember sitting there for graduation, and probably 90% of the kids in my class didn't have any jobs lined up or anything. It was very, very scary. And it ended up all working out. I always say God's got a plan and it's just not in your time frame.
I think everybody has their own time frame.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is in most of society, we have expectations. Well, you're going to go from graduating high school and you're going to go straight into college. And then from college, you're going to do this and this and this. But not everybody has that plan. And some parents roll with the punches, and that's fine. My child will find his or her way. But then there are those parents, and probably more likely, this is what our expectations are. But it sounds like your family was pretty understanding that you had a journey that you were going to figure out eventually where you needed to be and when you needed to be there.
Yeah, it was nice because they used to check on me every 2 weeks when I was at Vanderbilt just to make sure that I was still alive, I guess. But then after that, they never knew where I was at any. He's like, where are you now? What country? What state? What? And I mean, it was interesting, I'm sure, for them, but I mean, it was good. They were there in Scotland for the championship game. They came out to some of the games in Houston, which was nice when I was with the Oilers forever ago. And then, so that and Vanderbilt, all the games basically, but it was just kind of nice that they were a part of things and supporting that. And then they were just like, what do you want to do now? And I said, I don't know. How about chiropractic? And they're like, okay, sounds good.
That's awesome to have that kind of support. But guys, we're so old, at least for my family, when I would call home, it would be Sundays after 5 o'clock because the long distance rates were cheaper. We didn't have cell phones back then.
I don't remember. I don't know.
I do. And I remember the phone would ring in somebody's room. And if that person wasn't in the room, but somebody on the hall heard it, we automatically ran and picked it up because you didn't want to miss that long distance phone call.
Wow.
Yeah. Good old times. Well, JD, you get through, you're finished with football, your ankle eventually heals, you get through chiropractic school. What was the next step for you to set up practice, to go into somebody's practice, to learn, or where are you in the country at this point in time?
At this point, I'm in Huntington Beach already. And for some reason, because I didn't have any business experience, knowledge of how it works or anything, I decided to move to a totally different city that I never had been in before, didn't know anybody, and rent space out at another clinic. And it did not go well. I was probably there 4 months, and then the place we were renting, she decided to move back, so we had to move, and at that point I thought about, oh, should I go back to pharmacy school? I don't understand what's, it just, and then I ended up kind of catching my bearings and figuring it out. And I worked at another clinic, then I worked at another clinic. And then the one I worked at the longest is right down the street. I worked there for 11 years. And he and I started a lot of different online businesses and stuff. So it just gradually, it's like I was saying, you don't know what the timeline is, but you're going to get there if you just keep plugging away at it.
All right, I got some names I'm going to throw at you, and I want you to give me a response as soon as you hear the names.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Pat Akos.
Tall and went to Arkansas.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any of your other teammates who may be in here. Joe Peebles.
Joe Peebles. I can see him with a Bible in his hand, and he lived in Murfreesboro.
Bill Kelly.
Bill Kelly, great guy. He used to always hook me up with all the shirts and shorts and all that stuff I needed.
Luke Wyatt.
Same thing.
Okay. Jerry DiNardo.
Interesting guy. A little rough around the edges, but a good coach.
Greg Mantooth.
Who?
Greg Mantooth.
Oh my gosh. Coach Mantooth had the funniest. Oh, I have a funny story about him. So I don't know if it was after a practice scrimmage or what, the D-line's in their meeting. Coach Mantooth looks at me and he said, DeWitt, can you sit outside for a minute? So I walked out of the room and sat down, and he started ripping all those linemen, saying, this guy's a walk-on and he's kicking your butts out there. What the heck? You guys got to step it up. It was so funny.
I'm sure it was not funny to them, but it may have been funny to you. Ha ha. All right. You're off campus. You don't have football responsibilities. You don't have academic responsibilities. Where did you go get in trouble in town or near campus? And who were you with?
And this is at what point after all
this is undergrad? We're back in undergraduate.
Oh.
Who are you getting in trouble with, and where are y'all getting in trouble?
We're definitely at Exit Inn. That was the place that everybody got in trouble. And I mean, I don't know how many stories I have about that, but probably with Eric Dahlberg, Gary Rogers, Mark Mikesell, Bill Sullivan, the DeGraff and Reed twins once they got there. That's probably, and it was either that, or if you drove a little further, there was a Fat Tuesdays that had a Hooters right next to it. So we would go there.
Yeah, that was a bad combination for college guys.
True.
I remember that place. All right. Did you attend, just shake your head one way or the other, you don't have to speak. Did you attend any of the recruiting parties at the stadium upstairs in the big room? I forgot what it was called, the room. Okay. Did you or did you not see things that would make your head shake north and south or right or left that should have remained in that room?
From laughter, yeah.
Did you ever host any prospective players who ended up coming to school?
Oh, I don't know if they ended up coming to school, but we hosted guys all the time.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that I enjoy from these conversations, John, is learning the path that you've walked, learning the journey and the life lessons. And your one single-minded focus when you got to school and talking to Coach Brown every day, ultimately, that was not the only thing that led to you getting the scholarship. Clearly, your dedication on the field, maybe in the weight room, doing those things, but that had to have shown you some lessons that later in life, that ultimately now as a guy in his 50s, I assume you're 50 by now, that
51.
is allowed you to be an author of numerous books, to have a successful chiropractic practice. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot for the last minute or two. Can you share a little bit of that? Maybe these are things you've maybe shared in talks or speeches or things that you've given. What is it about college football or playing sports or being kind of behind the eight ball a little bit that propelled you to ultimately reach those goals?
It's the biggest thing I learned, and I think about this all the time, earning the scholarship, was you can do anything you put your mind to. And as long as in your mind, it doesn't matter. And everybody, I hear this all the time. Don't tell people your goals because they might shoot you down, and you don't want to be around those kind of people and all this stuff. And it wouldn't have mattered, because I just thought I would think it was funny if people had told me you're not going to get a scholarship, because I just use that, because I'm telling you, it's because of that movie Vision Quest. I would use that and just be like, oh, they don't think I can do it. And then that would just push me to do another squat or do another bench or whatever. And I was blessed too to have my friend that was the Arkansas stud guy. I mean, we go running in the middle of the snow through the woods, just because he was like, I want to train when nobody else would train. That way I'll have an advantage. And I kind of, that was a little infectious. And so I started kind of being like that too. But later on in life, it's just kind of like, okay, you can get whatever you want. Then the biggest thing is, well, what is it that you want? And you have to really, I'm actually listening to a book right now that's kind of takes you through some things to be like, well, okay, how would that make me feel? Or how would this work out? And that gets to be the hardest thing later on in life, is like, okay, if you're happy where you are now, that's great. But as coaches say, you never stay the same. You either get better or you get worse. And so always focusing on, okay, I want to get better. What do I need to do?
If you're Loudon Swain, who is your coach or your shoot? Who are those two guys in your life? Or are these are they made up characters in your life?
Well, I mean, I still have Shannon, my buddy from Arkansas. He's still in my head all the time. And there's a good friend of mine that I met when I was playing in the XFL. Adriano Belli was his name. He was about 6'6", big Italian Canadian guy. He ended up going to Montreal the year after I was there, and his family owns like the biggest deli in Canada, and they supply all the grocery stores and stuff. But I mean, every time I call him, and that's the good thing about really good friends, it doesn't matter if you haven't spoken for a few months or a few years. You call them and they're like, what do you need? I'm there for you. Let's go. And it's just really nice. Those are my two.
That's the beautiful thing about team sports, regardless of your sport. If you're a teammate, you're always a teammate. Yep. And you're so right, JD. I bet if you got together in Nashville with Dahlberg and Gary and all those guys, you might not have seen them for a decade. You might not have talked to them in years, but I guarantee you those stories still come up, and everybody by the end of the night is just in tears, howling from some of those stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
JD, I can't thank you enough, bud, for this conversation. This has been a lot of fun for me catching up.
It has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it a lot.
And guys, that's why I do these every week. We're telling the oral history of Vanderbilt Commodores football. We've had players, Commodores, who played in the 50s all the way up to last year's team. We had Cam Johnson, who's now at Arizona State. He was on a few weeks back before the season started. And we're going to keep doing these. I've got them booked up through the end of the year. And it's folks like JD that help make our program so memorable and such great teammates back in the day. So, John, thank you again, bud. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Anytime.
Stick around for just a minute before we sign off. If you're in Birmingham this Friday night, September 23rd at the Marriott Grandview, that's where the team's staying. The Black and Gold Club with Chris Griffin, they've organized a meet and greet, 5 o'clock to 6:30. You should be getting an email if you're in the Black and Gold Club. If you're not, or if you hadn't gotten it, just holler at Chris, holler at me. I've got all the information. But this way you can see the team, say hey to the coaches, and hopefully Coach Lee will stop by for a minute. But as always, guys, support the team and anchor down.
Yeah.
Good night.